virtual annual meeting. As Zoom has just told me, and I will tell all of you, this meeting is being recorded. So take note that you're being recorded. We hope to do this live in the future, but we are excited to have you all here with us virtually and have some really beautiful slides that should hopefully show up really nicely on all of your individual screens. And so I think, standard Zoom practices, make sure you're muted. We will be doing questions in the chat. So type your questions right into the Zoom chat, and Marilla and I will be looking at that, and Adair, as we go along. And we'll probably get to the questions at the end, but go ahead and type them in and we'll keep track as we go. And we are going to start right out into the minutes we need to approve. So we have a little bit of business that we'll do up front, then we get into the presentation. So the first thing is to approve last year's minutes, and the Vice President of the Board, Mary Brown, will be taking us through that procedure. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Heidi. Welcome all. I'll just read what we have per minute, so bear with me. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. President Heidi Tremarco opened the meeting at 6 p.m., welcoming a generous audience. Secretary Kelly LeMay read the minutes of the 2019 annual meeting, which were unanimously approved. Treasurer Ryan Johnson reported that the organization is financially stable, with an increase in assets of $1 million in fiscal year 20 and investments of $1,195,000, which are overseen by our Finance Committee and managed by Mascoma Wealth Management. The Treasurer's report was accepted unanimously. Heidi introduced the Board of Directors and thanked outgoing member Stan Kalla. The membership voted unanimously to elect Steve Lebrano to the board. Executive Director Adair Mulligan illustrated highlights of the past year, including partnership with the town and Trust for Public Land for the Mink Brook Community Forest. Our community engagement activities pivoted in the pandemic to our Hikes of the Month and Trails Challenge to help people explore the outdoors safely on their own. Care of our lands and trails is critical with increased outdoor activity. Dartmouth Environmental Studies Professor Richard Haworth, a member of the Conservancy Board, presented the evening's program, Environment and Society. Rich explored the evolution of the understanding of the terms conservation and sustainability, including environmental racism and environmental justice. Noting that the notion of untouched nature is largely a myth, he suggested carbon storage may be the best use of our forests as we strive to retain the integrity of intact landscapes. A lively question and answer session followed. President Tremarco closed the meeting with a surprise acknowledgement of Adair Mulligan's 10 years of service as Executive Director. The meeting adjourned at 7:38 p.m. Are there any questions? We'll call for a motion to approve these minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Jill.
Thank you. And Marilla will put up a poll for voting.
And just please note that only Conservancy members should vote on the motion. And it is a poll voting through Zoom. Does anybody have any questions about the voting procedure? Great.
Yep, they're coming in right now, the votes. All right. There's been a pause, so I'm going to close the voting. And I will share the results for you, Heidi.
Okay, wonderful. The motion passes. Thank you. And next on the agenda, we have the Treasurer's report, I believe. Yes, excellent. So I'll hand it over to our Treasurer. Let's see, do we have Ryan? Ryan Johnson, yes, you're here. Okay, great. Hand it over to Ryan.
Okay, thank you, everybody. My name is Ryan Johnson. I'm the treasurer of the Hanover Conservancy. The Conservancy carries out its mission with funds from our members' contributions supplemented with investment income, business support, and grants. The Conservancy is a not-for-profit 501c3 organization, meaning that your contributions to the Conservancy are tax deductible under law. The Conservancy's Volunteer Finance Committee meets periodically to review the finances of the organization and set financial policies and procedures. The Conservancy's investment portfolio consists of both restricted and unrestricted funds and is managed by Mascoma Wealth Management, according to an investment policy and guidelines approved by the board. The Conservancy contracts with an independent CPA firm that specializes in accounting for land trusts. The firm provides the Conservancy with a financial review and also the IRS Form 990, which may be viewed at our office on Lime Road. I am pleased to report that the organization is on steady financial footing. Our assets grew this year by $279,299, including a generous bequest from longtime member Robert Christie. Due to a rising stock market and sound investment management, our investment portfolio was approximately $1.47 million at our financial year-end close, which is June 30th. A modest PPP loan under the CARES Act was forgiven as expected. A summary of our financials can be found in the annual report recently sent to all households in Hanover, in addition to our members. And now I will pause for any questions. Okay. Okay, with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. All right. Thank you. I guess we'll vote.
So again, you will see, yep, there you go, your Zoom vote for Conservancy members.
All right, I will be closing the poll now and sharing the results.
Okay, the motion passes and the treasurer's report is approved. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, I'm just gonna run through a little bit of announcements about our staff and board composition, and then we will get on to the presentation. But we had a lot of changes this year, most notably being that our former program coordinator, Courtney, left us. Her graduate studies took her on a really exciting trip to Europe where she's studying renewable and sustainable systems, which was very exciting. So we were sad to say goodbye to Courtney, but really excited for where she's going. We have a new program coordinator, Marilla, and as you've seen, she is very ably handling our Zoom, which we really appreciate. But she really brings a wealth of knowledge to the role, and we're really excited to have her. She has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Conservation and Sustainability from UNH. She coordinated land stewardship activities for the Nature Conservancy's New Hampshire chapter. She is where she did a lot of work with legal monitoring and invasive plants. She's really good at easement monitoring, which we appreciate very much. She's very handy at trail work. She is chainsaw certified. She's just a wonderful addition to the Conservancy, and we hope you see her at our offices, or more exciting, I hope you see her out on our trails sometime. So if you do, say hi to Marilla. We're very excited to welcome her. Next slide, please. The other exciting news is that this spring, the board nominated Gail McPeak to emerita status. Really, if you've had any involvement with the Hanover Conservancy, you've probably noticed Gail. She is an incredible volunteer for the organization, really dedicated to the Hanover Conservancy. She's a wildlife biologist, so she brings a lot of knowledge. I've recently recorded a random bird sound I heard in the woods because I want Gail to listen to it and tell me what it's going to be. But she's so dedicated to the Conservancy. She is always the first one to raise her hand and say, yep, I can do that. I'll do that at a ton of meetings, really raising money with the development committee. She's really engaged in the community engagement committee, and she always brings these wonderful leaf cookies. So we're very excited to have Gail and to honor her with the emerita status. And on this slide, you can see our board of directors. And stepping off of the board this year is Jill Niles. And Jill has moved to Lyme, so our loss is Lyme's gain, but we are sad to see her go. And Patrick is really being pulled in a bunch of directions for the college, so he's such an asset for the organization that we know he'll remain a friend of the Conservancy, and we will continue to tag him for his project help. Taking their place, we have two candidates who are nominated. We did send their bios to the membership, so hopefully everybody saw that. But you will see the first is Mark Hiller. Mark has spent about the past 20 years working with forestry companies and conservation organizations on sustainable forest management issues. Most recently, he was with the Lime Timber Company in Hanover. Previously, he was the director of acquisitions at Greenwood Resources in Portland, Oregon. So we're so happy that he has made the move to the East Coast. He has a master's degree in business administration and forestry from Yale. And he lives in Hanover with his wife, Erica, and their young kids. And then Russ Muirhead, many people will recognize his name as a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives for our district. Russ is also the Robert Clements Professor of Democracy and Politics at the college and co-director of the Political Economy Project. He holds a PhD from Harvard University, and very exciting for us is he is an active hiker, Nordic skier, and cyclist, and I often see him on the trails with his chocolate lab. He lives with his wife, Antonia, on Lyme Road. And so now, and the board has met and has voted to approve both of them and move for their nomination to the board of directors. And so now I would move both of them forward. Let's see, Adair, can I do it together or do I need to take individual votes? I think we need to do it individually.
Yes,
So okay. Keep me in line. I will first move Mark Hiller to nomination to the board of directors. And we'll look for a second.
Second.
I think I heard Mary second that. Is that right? Okay, great. So Marilla, will you take us through a Zoom vote, please? Yeah, Zoom vote.
Yep. Alrighty, it is live.
Thank you.
Alrighty, I will be closing the vote and sharing the results.
Excellent, the motion passes. And the second motion is I move Russ Muirhead to a position on the board of directors.
I second.
Seconded by Rich. And there's the Zoom vote.
Alrighty, I'm closing the vote out.
Excellent, the motion passes and Russ is nominated as well. Thank you, everybody. We got pretty quick with those Zoom voting. Excellent, very nimble. Okay, Adair, I will hand it over to you.
All right, this is such a pleasure. We have some entertainment for you tonight in various different forms, but before we get going on a review of the highlights of our 60th year, we wanted to start with just a quick set of 3 trivia questions for you. We're going to have 3 sets of them through our program tonight. So I want you to keep track of your answers. We promise that we are going to share the proper answers at the end, and then we'll invite you to, even if you found that you're a loser, please come in and get a Hanover Conservancy magnet for your car. But at the very least, you could put your name in a raffle for a Conservancy hat. So Marilla, take it away with the trivia, please.
Alrighty, I'll be launching the first set. And then you just need to scroll down to see all of them on your screen.
There are 3 questions.
Give everyone one more minute. They're slowly rolling in.
Oh, there were harder trivia questions than I was expecting. I hope we're not being graded because
No. We put the
Someone-
tough stuff in the beginning.
Someone dug very deep.
Alrighty. Get your last set polls in. I'm going to be closing it out. Everyone's answering now. Alrighty, closing the poll out.
All right. All right, so we're going to start with just a quick review of what happened over this remarkable last year, our 60th anniversary year. I hope you saw the beautiful banners that we had on Main Street in the month of August. And this was, again, something that Gail arranged for us with the Department of Parks and Recreation from the town side. So that got everybody in a festive mood. And I'm going to run through the highlights quickly. Land conservation, the highlight of our year, actually of the last 20 years for land conservation, has been finally getting the Mink Brook Community Forest protected, something that our organization had been working on literally for a generation, and it is now safely in the hands of the town of Hanover, thanks to efforts from the town side and the Trust for Public Land. And Karen Geiling and I had an absolute ball out there at the end of February, the day after the land was transferred, and we met out there to take down the posted signs. It was a raw, bitter, cold day, and we were feeling so warm about the whole thing. It was very exciting. And very recently, just a couple of weeks ago, Senator Jean Shaheen was able to join us for a visit to the Mink Brook Community Forest. You see Mary there to the senator's right, and then you see Julia Griffin in the sweater on the left, and the guy in the blue shirt to the left of the senator is J.T. Horn from the Trust for Public Land, who managed this very, very complex, very expensive project. We thank all of you who contributed to this in one way or another, and it was a real community win. And then not so much a win was the hard decision that the beautiful log bridge at the Mink Brook Nature Preserve really had seen its last passenger, and it was time to decommission it. We are working with Thayer students right now on a potential design for a replacement. This is a very exciting project for us to work with them, to work with the Abenaki and the Coasec Band of the Abenaki, led by Art Hanchett, and the Upper Valley Land Trust, of course, which holds the conservation deed restrictions on the property. For now, this is how you're going to have to get across the brook, but we are very hopeful that next summer, if not next spring, we will have something else in place that will be just as exciting as that one was. Another thing that happened this year is that Fisher Financial Advisors helped us create a new map of our hikes of the month. And the little red lines you see all over this one here are the depiction of where these routes go. There are 40 of them all over town. And we have copies of this map, paper copies for you to pick up at our office, or you can download it online. Certainly you can find all of the descriptions online and get yourself out in the woods for a nice visit. The Hanover Trails Challenge was a success again. I think this was the 8th year that we've done it. This again was a brainchild of Gail McPeak. We had something like 150 families involved with this, getting out to explore. And the very end of it is a celebration at Fall Fest, which we do with the Hanover Parks and Recreation Department. And we always have a table there. And this year the kids made trail name necklaces. Foxy in the upper left-hand corner is one of my favorites. Land stewardship, it was a very busy year. Everybody was out on our trails, and the trails we're showing the love for sure. We had some great volunteer adventures out there. Marilla is very skilled at gathering this sort of help. This is a group from Hypertherm that came out to help us do some trail benching. They looked to me like they were whistling while they worked, but they got a lot done at Balch Hill and at other places. And we know that this is a big responsibility always going forward. We have a new kiosk at the Mayor Niles and Britton Forest, thanks to Peter and Peregrine Spiegel, who are neighbors in that area of town. And this is going to be a great thing. We'll have maps for both properties up on the kiosk. Actually, they're up there now. And this will keep the maps dry, thank goodness. But it's also an important safety feature because those trails do not reach up to the AT, and we had confusion from people who were getting lost trying to find that. We were also thrilled to pieces that here in Hanover Magazine featured the Hanover Conservancy's 60th anniversary year in their fall issue, and it was a beautiful one. If you didn't see it when it came to your post office box, stop in because we have a couple of extra copies here. And then, of course, on October 2nd, we held a wonderful celebration just across Route 10 here and Lime Road from our offices at Rivercrest, thanks to Dartmouth College for hosting us. This beautiful cake was made for us by my Brigadero. And obviously, I do not own an iron, but otherwise the spread looks lovely. We had wonderful food donated by the Hanover Food Co-op and others, and cider, Poverty Lane Orchards, and Lindy McNamara helped put a lot of all that together. We had a wonderful time. Here's our setup crew. And then Heidi introduced the program, and we made it a celebration of partnerships that are so important to us. And here we are presenting a blueberry bush to Russ Hirschler, the executive director of the Upper Valley Trails Alliance. That is an important partner for us. We rely on them a lot for their expertise in managing our trails. We also presented one to JT Horn for the Trust for Public Land, and to Betsy McGeehan, who also was an essential part of getting that project going. In absentia, we presented awards to Julia Griffin and Rob Hausman from the town of Hanover. They were not able to join us on October 2nd, so we had a wonderful event here with them last week at our offices, and it was just a lovely time to celebrate all that they've done. So people, I think, got into the spirit for sure. And one of the most moving moments was hearing from our founder, Bob Norman, who was there in 1961 and gathered 4 other friends together to say, what are we going to do about protecting our town of Hanover? And this is maybe the best picture I've ever seen. This is current and former board members of the Hanover Conservation Council and Conservancy. There are 5 council presidents in that photograph. I think there were 2 more who were here and who must have gotten away from me before the photographer helped me wrangle everybody up. But this is going to be blown up and is going to go on our wall here. And I have a copy. Bob Norman, if you're listening, I have one that I'm bringing to you this week, you and Peter Armstrong. And we also remember those who, many people who were not able to be with us because they're no longer with us. And on the upper right, Carolyn Tenney, our very first president and one of the 5 founders. And on the left, we have Ed Chamberlain and Brian Quinn and Allie Quinn, who are all on our board. And then Brian Walsh, also, who at the time was chair of our Board of Selectmen in town and who was a great friend and a great partner. The lower right, Jim Hornig, former president of the Conservancy. So we want to thank all of you, our members, for your support. And if you're not a member, of course, you're feeling might motivated to join for sure. Okay, so it's time to stop for some more trivia. Here's your next set of 3 questions, and Marilla will put that up on the board, and let's see how fast people can do this.
All right, the trivia is live.
Yeah, and here's a trick question in here.
Give everyone a couple minutes to read through it all and answer the questions.
We've got everybody stumped already.
We have a little over half people have answered so far. Alrighty, I'm gonna be closing the poll. One more second. All right.
Okay. So this is the main part of the program I want to share with you tonight. And I promise you that I have the nerve to say that I hope you're going to learn something that you didn't know by the time we're done tonight. I learned things in presenting this that I wasn't quite sure of. But one thing is very clear about the past of our lands here in Hanover is that they have always been a homeland for the people of the Dawn and always will be. So let's start with on the western side of town. This is a 1871 view of Balch Hill, right underneath where the lettering is there. This is Adna Balch's farm, and that's the stone house that you all is still on the road there. This is East Wheelock Street heading up the hill toward the Grass Road Trescott intersection. And this also was part of Adna's farm. He was quite the fellow. He was a state legislator. He had an elegant house in town, approximately where Collis is right now. But Balch Hill was named after him. Here's another view recently shared with me by Jay Barrett. This is East Wheelock Street, if you can believe it or not. This is Crosby Street coming in, looking up at Balch Hill, which you see up here. And this area is to orient you right about where the tennis courts are now and the gym. Balch Hills had some beautiful big old trees for many, many years. This champion oak would have been a champion had it not sort of split down the middle and peeled away like a dying tulip just before we had our trees measured. But there's a wonderful deep history here. It was for many years part of the Balch and later farms, part of where heifers were grazed and pastured. There were orchards up there. This is a scene from the 50s looking down on Baker Tower right here. You can see how development has proceeded there, but it's been a favorite place for many years. Many people don't know about Sally Duguette, who was a young woman who in the late 1700s sort of lost her mind over a broken love affair and ended up being a hermit on Balch Hill. For many, many years, people would help her build her little shelter, and when it blew down, they'd help rebuild it. And she finally was found one morning after a snowstorm, having wandered out in the snow and not made it home safely. And so her neighbors got together and had her buried in the Dartmouth Cemetery and put up a stone in her memory. The Hermit of Balch Hill. Well, this is Balch Hill today from a game cam. Lots of wildlife, including all the humans who run around up there. Okay, so let's go to the Rinker Steel Natural Area. We've got some very deep history going on here. And now we're going back to 14,000 years ago when Glacial Lake Hitchcock was, inundating our valley all the way up from Connecticut, where a rock dam had accumulated as the glacier was retreating and had filled up the river valley all the way past where we are in Hanover. Now, one of our former board members, Dick Burney, produced this absolutely marvelous slide to show how deep the lake would have been in our area at its fullest extent. I particularly love the fact that he added a shark here attacking the crow on the common. But it wasn't long before the glacial lake began to drain. But when it did, it left behind two very distinctive things that really affect our use of the property today. One of them is the lake bottom sediments that you see on the lower left-hand side. We call them varves, and they're very much like tree rings in that they are layers of sediment laid down in the summer when the water is moving around and circulating, and in the wintertime when the fine particles settle out because the lake is covered with ice. Well, this has very interesting physical properties and has defied bridge builders for many years after this. So this is the glacial lake's legacy to this property. The other piece of it is the topography that we see. Look at these two women. These are two Hanover Conservancy presidents whom I will not identify because we're showing their less attractive side, struggling up a steep hillside here. The reason it's a steep hillside is that this is former lake bottom sediment that was then carved out by Camp Brook as it then tumbled down through these varves and lake bottom sediments, creating these steep things here, these steep slopes. Today, what we can see out there besides those slopes are the remains of a quarry where the stone for part of the White Church was apparently taken, along with some buildings in lime. And then, of course, there's the Jim and Evelyn Hornig natural area at Lower Slade Brook, one perfectly beautiful place. Well, the history of this place is a little hard to discern. I'm showing you here the 1855 map. This is Slade Brook right here, and the Connecticut River with an island. You see that there are a couple of farms nearby, and I did learn that this fellow Beathro had leased some land from some of his neighbors, but we think it was always pretty much just a woodlot. This is a very old woods road that goes up the north side of the brook and follows it, and that's where the trail goes these days. But there's not too much else to really learn about this piece of property that we've been able to tell. But its more recent history is pretty fascinating. It was here on the left, you can see the orange line indicates River Road, okay? And this blotchy gray-white area is an aerial photograph of a gravel pit that was just south of the brook, which you can see here in blue. And as part of our conservation project, what happened here was that the developer who owned all of this land wanted to develop all of it. And working with the planning board, they decided that they would concentrate development here over on the right side. You can see it built out through this aerial photograph, and then conserve the rest of it around so that everyone in the neighborhood could enjoy all of this as well as the public. So all of that's a very interesting bit of how glacial history and the geological history of it led to the gravel pit that led to a development that led to the conservation project. And today it's an unusual spot for hosting Louisiana water thrush, which is an uncommon bird in the area. And it has a lovely song if you've ever been out there in the springtime, especially. And then, of course, the Mink Brook Nature Preserve. This place is so full of history. And the history really begins with what the glacier brought, rocks that in their own way are alive today and have inspired so many different peoples for so many thousands of years. It also inspired Eleazar Wheelock, who, when the offer of 2,000 acres on either side of this brook was dangled in front of him if he would cite his college here in Hanover. He said, oh, well, you know, there's a good place for a mill on this brook. This is the largest brook in Hanover. I think I'm going to go for it. And so this is why Dartmouth is here in Hanover, is because of those falls on this brook. Now, this place has a fascinating history. Unfortunately, it's been a little bit better documented with photography here. On the upper right, we're looking at the 1855 map of this area. Here's Mink Brook right here. Here's downtown Hanover. And this is Route 10 coming south out of town towards Lebanon, the town line. And you see that there's not a whole lot of development going on here. This is what the scene looked like. Here is Mink Brook down in this little valley here. And you can see Hanover on the terrace above. This is another glacial lake terrace from Glacial Lake Hitchcock. You can see this and this very equal in dimension and in altitude, in the topography here. This is part of the former lake bottom of the lake, and the stream is running right through there. This is an 1865 photograph. A couple years later, it had already become a destination for people who wanted to hang out in nature. Here's a young man on the rocks in 1880. And then maybe a little farther after that, let's see, here's downtown. As you can see, Baker has been built. The town has been built out quite a bit. Mink Brook is right along here. There's a little bridge, Pine Knoll Cemetery. And I want to zero in on this area here. This is the Charles Stone Farm, which at one time was owned by Dartmouth, and Charles Stone was farming up in the Trescott lands. And when they decided, you know, we need to get the farms off of that and make that into a public drinking water supply area, we're going to swap farms with Mr. Stone. So, and one day in the very late 1890s, Mr. Stone milked his cows in their barn in the morning in the Trescott lands, what's now the Trescott lands, drove them, meaning marched along with them through downtown Hanover to their new barn and milked them in their new barn in the afternoon. So here's a close-up of that barn and the farm. This is where now the development of the Mitchell and Granger and Brook Road neighborhood is. These are from the 1940s, 1950s. And this is the first house that was built there by architect Frank Barrett, Sr. And here's his layout of the subdivision that went in there. Here's Brook Road, here's Mink Brook right here. And we have all of this imagery courtesy of that little boy who grew up to be Jay Barrett, at one time Hanover zoning administrator, an architect, and a great friend of the Hanover Conservancy. And here he is with his brothers when the grading equipment came along to sculpt down those glacial terraces. So when he was a boy in the 1960s and 70s, of course, the Clean Water Act had not been passed. And so Mink Brook was not a place that you'd want to get in unless you really wanted a nice an infection or a case of hepatitis or something, because all the sewage from Etna Village, Greensboro Road, all the way on down was flowing through this stream. An important part of its history. Today, here's Mink Brook, one of the most beautiful places around, and a place that people love and enjoy, bring their children. It's a good spot, and great wild brook trout habitat. This is New Hampshire Fish and Game. They're cold water fisheries biologist Diane Timmons and a high school assistant here volunteering. And they were doing an assessment of wild brook trout habitat with Trout Unlimited in 2012, I think. And she looked me right in the face and said, Adair, this is some of the best wild brook trout habitat I've seen anywhere. And she lives in the North Country of New Hampshire. So let's turn now to the Greensboro Ridge Natural Area. And it's a little hard to figure out what was going on here in 1855. This is the same map I showed you before, but just a little A little farther east, this is the road that's now pretty much the route of 120, Greensboro Road here. And our Greensboro Bridge Natural Area is right around this area here. Then as now, it's the home of porcupines and a lot of vernal pools. So there are salamanders, red Fs. And who knows, was it at one time cleared for sheep pasturage? It's possible. Now, this photograph is one from Washburn Hill Road in Lyme. It's not from Hanover, but I know for sure that this isn't Greensboro Ridge because it's missing all the boulders that were up there. Probably the property was a woodlot for many years. Maybe some sheep had been pastured there. There's one stone wall that runs on its east boundary, but that's about it. So we really don't know. But along about 2004, the same developers who were working at Slade Brook also purchased this piece of land here. And again, the same concept really changed the history of this property. All of these beautiful homes were to be spread out all over the acreage here. There were a couple of sites cleared here and here and here as demonstration sites. This is Appalachian Trail land up here. And the planning board worked with our board and the developer and said, you know, it'll be cheaper for you to cluster those houses down here. And then let's protect the backland so that all of these neighbors have this lovely area to visit and go to as part of the amenity of their property, but also open to the public. So this is Greensboro Ridge today. Wonderful wildflowers, terrific vernal pools, and a lot of fun for people who like to pick up squishy things. So let's go now to rural Hanover. And here we're going to stop at the Moisture Meadow where we have a conservation easement. And this is an interesting spot. Here's Hanover Center here. This is the northern leg of Dogford Road. Here it goes, this is known as the Nut Farm now, goes down this way. This is Slade Brook running north of it. Our property that we just looked at was over in this area. And here you see in 1855, the farm belonging to J. Fellows. Well, it was in the Fellows family for the better part of 100 years till it became owned by the Elder family, who owned it till the 1950s. It was a large farm about both sides of the road. And the area that we have an easement upon is right about in this area here, just west of where the farmhouse still stands. The barns are all gone, but the farmhouse still stands. And first it was sheep, then later it was cattle. And I am told by a very good authority, Tim Bent from Etna, that moonshine was made here during Prohibition, but I'm sure that the Fellows and Elders had nothing to do with that. In 1892, you can see it's still owned by the Fellows family. And here on this map, it's really pointed out as the Fellows homestead. And this gives us a clue to maybe something about this family. And we learned by looking at the 1885 Grafton County Gazetteer that Asa Fellows in 1885 was a selectman, a justice of the peace, deacon of the Second Congregational Church, and quite the upstanding citizen, who had a sugar orchard, we call it sugar bush these days, of 160 trees, 150 apple trees, 64 merino sheep, which were the creme de la creme of the sheep breeds. And he raised bees on his 100 acres. And it is no accident that he was so successful because he had excellent soils on this property. So the history, the natural history of the land really reflects itself in the cultural history and the human history of what happens on the land. When we were out there, we found the remains of an evaporator and a sugar house here, a lot of sap buckets around. And this is what it looks like today. It's a beautiful open property. Turkeys love it. And the forested part on the north side still is excellent for protecting the quality of the tributaries that come into Slade Brook, which is just beyond these trees here. Lots of lovely wildflowers too. So now let's turn to the remoter part of eastern Hanover. And we're going to start with the Mill Pond Forest and the Huggins Trail access at the top of Moose Mountain Lodge Road. Now, here we are at Mill Pond. This was taken maybe 5-6 years ago when the beavers hadn't quite eaten themselves out yet. And so the pond today is not as full as this because the beavers have been working hard on it. But if you look very carefully here, you see this, there's really a hard line on this shore here, which is the western shore of the pond. And the clue to that is, here's a look from the other side of it. This is a stone dam that had been built by David Woodward and possibly with his brother Moses and maybe with Israel, another member of their family, sometime between 1775 and 1795. They built an undershot mill in a extremely steep location, which I'll show you. Think it was a grist mill because the grinding stone was for years over the mantle, over the fireplace at Moose Mountain Lodge nearby. Could have also been a sawmill. But here's the dam that we were just looking at right here. And these are a series of the X's of beaver dams that we saw in the previous photograph. And if you walk the trail up from the little parking area, you walk right here between these two cellar holes. This one is easier to see. I actually, until I was doing this program and noticed this, I've never found this one. So I'm headed up there later this week to check on that cellar hole, see what that's all about. So this is what that mill structure looked like. Here and here, and also there are more structures in here. These are now specifically protected in our conservation easement. It's the only one in which we have a feature like this. So nearby, this was part at one time of the Dana farm. And I'm going to orient you here on the left. This is 3 Mile Road. This is the 1892 map of the area. And this is Rudsboro Road going down here. And then this is Old Dana Road connecting with Chandler Road and Corey Road over there. So this is quite a busy intersection, much busier at that time. There was a schoolhouse there at one time. But J.W. Dana, John Dana, had this land here and owned quite a bit up in this area that included the Mill Pond Forest that we know today. And we found out from the County Gazetteer in 1885 that, well, his soils, as you can tell, were a little bit different from what the people at the Fellows Farm were inheriting. They had a sugar orchard of 1,000 trees. It was not hard to grow maples on that west slope of Moose Mountain. And John Dana grew wool. Presumably the sheep grew the wool and he grew them. But I noticed that they weren't labeled merino, so it might have been a lesser breed of sheep. We're not really quite sure. But his descendant, Elmer Dana, here is drawing a limb of timber to be used to build Moose Mountain Lodge on what was part of his family's old farm. So this is an interesting map that I want to show you. We've actually been depending on these a bit for our conservation work. These were done by the state of New Hampshire in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and up into the 60s to try to get ahead of the white pine blister rust, which was a fungus that was attacking white pines, and the alternate host was gooseberry. And they sent foresters and anybody that they could get to go out in the woods to make these very specific maps to find out what the condition of the forest was, and also to pull out the gooseberries when they found them. Well, if you look carefully at this map on the right-hand side, you will see Mill Pond right here. You'll see these two cellar holes, that little box and this little box here. CH on either side means cellar hole. And you see they have drawn in the stone walls. They've drawn in Moose Mountain Lodge and its ski tow. And here's Moose Mountain Lodge Road coming down. And this map was done in 1938. I think most of you know that in the fall of that year, we had the most devastating hurricane in this region that we've had in modern history. And you notice that it's all marked blown down over here. That gives us quite a view into the history of this particular place. This is Mill Pond Forest today. On the right-hand side, turkey tracks, turkeys everywhere, and moose. You can often see signs of my moose. I was wearing the same boots each day, so you get a bit of a, and you know, when the snow has melted a little bit, the tracks begin to look bigger and bigger and bigger. I do say that the pond is not quite that full these days because the beavers that were there for so many years, so long that their beaver lodge actually shows in a satellite photograph from space, that they ate themselves out and they've taken a break from visiting Mill Pond, but I know that they'll be back when their feed grows back. So let's go a little bit north on a budding property, the Shumway Forest. And if we look at this 1892 map of Hanover, you see a big blank space. This is pretty much where the Shumway Forest is. And on the right-hand side is a map of the property boundaries in yellow. And to me, that looks like a gerrymandered election district. And pretty much it's the same concept without the politics involved. You can see that this piece was cut out of a large one, and there was more that was cut out over here. This at one time was one large farm. This little piece at one time was sold to the Mascoma Beagle Club, of all people. And then the federal government bought that to route the Appalachian Trail onto it. Now, the photo on the left was taken not here, but not far away at the Trescott Water Supply lands. But I've got it in here really just to remind us that this landscape was very, very different 150 years ago. And here's another one taken from Lime Center, about 1900, because that's my house and it didn't have the cupola on the barn yet. But this is really what we could have expected that rural and East Hanover looked like. The trees pretty much gone except along the hedgerows, along the stone walls, used to build the buildings, used to heat the buildings, and then cleared away for pasturage or for cropland. And today we have all of these stone walls left on these properties as a reminder of this. And at one time, an agency in New York in 1871 estimated that over 250,000 miles of stone walls had been built in New England and New York during a very few decades at the beginning of the 19th century, mostly to address sheep, keep sheep in, keep sheep out, whatever. In the 1980s, the Appalachian Trail, which used to run on the route of the Harris Trail here, this brown trail, got moved up onto the summit and along the ridge of Moose Mountain. So it was moved along the Dartmouth property here and up across the Shumway Forest. These yellow lines indicate scenic easements that were put in place in the 1980s to protect the corridor of the trail. The easement that the Conservancy laid over that is even more restrictive and more protective. Oop, wrong way. Today at the Shumway Forest, bobcat sign everywhere, wonderful wildflowers like this bottle gentian, which is a fall wildflower that is so curious and so lovely. And some really incredible wetlands there. These tamaracks at this time of year in their golden glory before they drop their needles. And a great place for hiking, as you know. Lots of trails intersecting on the Shumway Forest. And if you look very, very closely, you might find sundew and other things in the wetlands and fens that are on the mountain. So let's go a little farther north on Moose Mountain to the McKinley Tract. This is, we were down here before. Here's the Wolfboro Road that used to run from downtown Hanover and Dartmouth College all the way to Wolfboro. And that was built in the late 1700s for the colonial governor to be able to attend the initial commencement exercises at Dartmouth. And it was still a travel concern with people living along it way up here until, you know, quite some time later. This is Goose Pond Road. We're in the northeast corner of town now. The 1855 map shows you where the action was. And this right in here is where the McKinley Tract is now. Fast forward to 1892, you can see a lot more families have moved in. Goose Pond, this is the very northern tip of Goose Pond right here. And this is the McKinley Tract today, pretty much unchanged, except it's I'm sure grown back a lot of the lumber that may have been taken off it. Painted Trillium on this northeast slope is just a beautiful thing to look at. But then one of my favorite properties is perhaps our smallest one. This is a 1.5 acre little gem, not far from the McKinley Tract on Tunis Brook. And you can see it's got some glacial history. This is one of the best glacial erratics in the town of Hanover. And I call your attention to the hat that it has. When our geologist board member, Dick Burney, came out here to look at this with me, he said, well, the only thing that could have dropped that stone on top of this erratic was the glacier. Otherwise, there'd be no other way to get it up there. So this stone, he thinks, traveled from the Holt's Edge ledge area in Lyme over here across the valley and got a little hat along with the in the bargain. But what's really interesting about this place is its 19th century history. This is a small brook. It's not a big brook, but there was apparently enough flow that could be gathered during the springtime to run an up and down sawmill, like the Eric Sloan drawing that you see here in the upper left, where this carriage would move up and down to saw its way through a log. The mill was built based on research that we did by Amos Kinney, probably in 1849 when he bought the land from Jonathan Freeman, who was one of the large landowners in town. But interestingly, it was only taxed for the period 1849 to 1861. And we wondered why. Why did they stop taxing it? Why then did the property just disappear in the property records? And our best guess is that the mill blew out during what was called at the time a freshet, a flood. There were, our weather records go back and show that in April of 1861, there was a heavy flood. And by that time, if you can picture, a lot of the landscape had been cleared. And so a heavy rainstorm would affect the streams a lot differently than it would if it fell onto forest land. And many, many little mills were washed out and blown out by heavy storms like that during this time period, and then eventually just abandoned because they couldn't keep them going. Well, then what was really fascinating was that about 6 weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago, I had a message from a gentleman from Maryland who said, I got your name from somebody and I've just bought an historic house on Goose Pond Road. Would you like to come look at it? And apparently this gentleman knew my soft spot for historic houses. And I said, well, you know, there's no such thing as an historic house that I don't want to come see. So sure, I'll see you at the end of my workday. So I went over and I found myself on Goose Pond Road at this spot right here, this greenhouse, gray greenhouse, and checking the 1855 map, I see the name A. Kinney on it. And here's the Kinney Mill on the Tunisbrook Mill site. And then it turns out that it's believed that he built this house in 1849, the year that the mill was established. And if you look at the beams inside his house, you see the stripe marks on this beam here. This is the sort of thing that you find with the marks of an up and down saw. So we thought it was pretty nifty to put together this house, which has miraculously survived all of this time without being modernized within an inch of its life, so close to where the builder also had a mill. So the Tunisbrook Mill lot today is just a wonderful place to go for moose. I always see moose sign when I'm there. The little red Fs, the salamanders are there for sure. Ruffed grouse, we always see ruffed grouse sign there. And one day we saw an otter slide. Thought that was pretty nifty. Let's turn to the Mare Niles Forest, just on the other side of the Moose Mountain Ridge. These are the quartzite ledges that we call the white ledges. And back in 1855, here's that ledge right here. And we have the end of 3 Mile Road here. And then we have the end of Hanover Center Road here. And this is Thompson Road coming up here. And you see that they don't join. Mare Niles Forest is this area right here. By 1892, looks like the people who lived here and the people who lived here decided that, well, they really could use a road that would join them, but maybe not directly. Maybe they'd like to do it this way. So the Barnes family by 1892 had taken over. This is William Barnes and Henry Barnes. Here again is the property. And we learn that I don't know if they were brothers or father and son, but Henry had a sugar orchard. Of course, maple trees grew pretty well on that slope, 220 acres. And his brother also had a sugar orchard and 50 sheep. And we do see on the map that we have of these two properties today, which we own, the Britton Forest, the Mare Niles Forest, all these little lines here are indicating stone walls. And here you can see that they're probably separating pastures of some sort. Here's Moose Mountains Ridge. Here's the Appalachian Trail over here on the right. But after the Barnes family, the property came into the possession of International Paper. And they owned all of the land that is now the Appalachian Trail corridor on the spine of Moose Mountain. And they decided that the most efficient way to pull their lumber out was to go straight downhill. And so their tote road, which we still call it today, goes straight up the mountain. And it's 9 minutes of huffing and puffing until you stop to take a break. Now here's the White Pine Blister Rust map again from 1938. Here's the summit, here's the North Peak right here. Here are some of these other ledges that we've been looking at. And this is what the property looked like at one time. Open fields, here's 3 Mile Road right over here. Pine brush, pine in pasture, hardwoods. So very different forest history. When you see a stone wall in the woods, my father asked me once, why would anybody build a stone wall in the woods? And it was because the woods weren't there when the stone wall was built. We need to remember what an important force nature is and what natural succession will do. So the Mare Niles Forest today is a beautiful place for looking for ferns. Of course, it abuts the Appalachian Trail. We have our new kiosk and lots of bears. This is Alcott Smith, a favorite trip leader for us, showing us a bear nest. And I was asked recently, I didn't know that bears built nests. Well, they don't really, but what they will do is climb up in a beech tree, grab individual branches filled with beech nuts, pull them over to themselves to rip off the beech nuts, grab another branch and pull it over. And before you know it, you've got a complete tangle of branches that then just look like a nest in a tree. So lastly, we're going to turn to the Britton Forest, just north of this. And again, the glacier has been there in the past. And this is not as an impressive a one as over the Tunesbrook Mill Lot, but it's still pretty neat. And again, signs of sheep culture everywhere. And if you haven't discovered the Stonewall Mapper for New Hampshire, and you give yourself at least an hour to go play with it, go Google this, find it online, and you will see that it shows where stone walls are throughout our town, throughout our region. This is a combined project of the New Hampshire State geologist, Rick Chorman, working with a member of the Lyme Historians and their cellar hole committee, of which I'm a part in other parts of my life, and a couple of other volunteers. And they've created this system where you can go on and you can actually add to the database by picking out the stone walls that appear as little lines on this LiDAR map. This is another projection of this called LiDAR, Light Detection and Ranging. I don't know who makes up these acronyms, but you might think of this as sort of a detailed X-ray of the Earth's surface. And here we see, this here's the Mayor Niles Forest. Here's the Tote Road, which shows going right up to the AT lands on the summit. This is the Britton Forest here, and here's the stone wall that we just looked at in the last photograph. So you can zoom in on this on your own property or anywhere else in New Hampshire that you'd like, and explore it in detail and find the stone walls. This is the Britton Forest today. That red F, boy, those guys really get around. On the lower left, you have starflower, which is really one of, I think it's my favorite wildflower. It's a northern one. This is at the southern edge of its range. And a beautiful big maple that has been left here with, I think that's chicken in the woods growing on the side of it. And that is one of my favorite pictures ever taken. I believe this is Heidi's daughter, and she's crossing a stream at the Britton Forest. So I'm going to share with you just 5 quick slides about our Promise to Protect new strategic plan, because that photograph is really what it's all about. The Conservancy is preparing to protect our town for them going to the future. So while everybody was hunkering down with the pandemic, we were hunkering down doing a new strategic plan. And I'm not going to share with you everything that's in it, just really the high points of what is new and different about this one. We have focused on climate resilience for quite some time now in our land protection priorities, but we are specifically adding new technology that's coming from the Nature Conservancy on resilience planning. And so that is being incorporated into our decision making here. We're working on strengthening our conservation partnerships. We're so successful with the Minkbrook Community Forest, and looking about how we can thoughtfully support renewable energy installations that are well sited to complement wildlife habitat. With land stewardship, we've really got to be prepared to react for long-term financial responsibilities. We have promised to forever take care of these pieces of land. And that can get dicey from time to time. It can get very expensive from time to time. And we need to have the funds to be able to do the job. We want to involve our community even more than we have before. These are Hanover High School students on Earth Day planting native trees at our Minkbrook Nature Preserve. And we want to also have better access for everyone, not only making everyone feel welcome at our properties, no matter who they are, but also accommodating people who might need to sit down and take a rest, people who might not be able to move as fast as others. Community engagement program, we've learned how important the self-guided options that we have been working on, like the self-guided Hanover Hikes of the Month and the Hanover Trails Challenge. We want to do more of that kind of thing so that people can confidently go outside on their own and discover what a beautiful town we live in. What we're doing tonight, linking our natural history and our cultural history and using our lands for learning. Advocacy, got to be right there for climate resilience, talking with the town and the college on their master plans, and of course, advancing environmental justice. And at the end of the day, we can't do it if our organization is not sustainable. So we are integrating actively diversity, equity, and inclusion into everything that we do. We need to diversify our revenue stream to deepen our base of support and ensure high standards of performance on everything we do, whether it's easement monitoring or bridge building or land protection, whatever it is. So let's take a break and let's do some more trivia. Marilla?
All right. So this is the last set of questions, and then in just a few minutes, we'll be giving you all the answers to all the other questions. And I'm just going to give you guys, it's probably a minute because we want to save some room at the end for questions for the whole meeting.
We need to wake everybody up. You can put them to sleep.
Just a few more moments and then I'll be closing out and we'll be getting to the trivia answers. All right, gonna close the poll out. Perfect. All right. And now I'm going to be sharing my screen for everyone. All right, so before we get to the trivia answers, as many of you know that we are celebrating our 60 years, which is really amazing. And to kind of reflect back on all the work that has gone on for the past 60 years and all the conservation success stories, we have been working with a local high schooler, Ezra McGinney Smith, to put together a video to kind of reflect on our story. And of course, Gail McPeak has been working a lot with Ezra, so really thankful for her. And so we're going to share you a quick little sneak peek, give you a little taste of the full video before it comes out.
Here we are at Lower Slade Brook, which is named in honor of Jim and Evelyn Hornig, who recognized the importance of conserving this really beautiful natural area in Hanover. Jim was our board president for the Hanover Conservancy and served on the town's planning board, and also was a professor of environmental studies at Dartmouth College. We love it at Slade Brook. We love the trails. It's one of the closest ones to our home, and we come all the time. I love how the trail is so accessible, and I love seeing it over the seasons. Or in the summer, we go to Slade Brook to enjoy the water. As soon as you get in the shade, you can feel it cool down, and it's a really nice break from the summer heat.
All right, and so Ezra is still working on it, putting the finishing touches. So hopefully in December sometime, we'll be able to share the full video with everyone. All right, and so the moment, sorry, the moment everyone's been waiting for, some trivia answers to all those tough questions we put you guys to. All right, so for the first question, I'm going to try to go through these a little bit quick. The answer is F, all of the above. All right, and for question 2, for how many volunteers have served on the board of directors over the last 60 years is C, 124 volunteers, which is amazing. All right, and so for question 3, which of the names did we consider in 2011? We actually pondered through all of these, so the answer is E, all of the above, but finally came up with Hanover Conservancy. And then for question 4, which is something I learned this year is E, all the above for our logo options. So actually a local person, John Scottford of Dartmouth College, kind of helped design this logo for us. And he is, I guess, a pretty famous local person. He helped design a number of famous logos, especially the 6-cent stamp that features Daniel Webster. And so one of the questions was the Department of Colorado Public Health steal our logo. They actually did, but we worked with some people and just to let them know. And they, to your left is the new logo that they came up with. All right, so for the next set of questions, or question 5, it is Greenboro Ridge in Mill Pond Forest that you can access the AT to go all the way to Mount Katahdin. And for question 6, it is E, A, B, and D for the answer. And then for the last set of questions, maintaining the trails requires F, volunteers, paint, sweat, and E, a cutter mattock, which is a special tool you can use. Sometimes there might be a little tears, but not usually. For question 8, you can find all these awesome creatures at our protected lands. And for the last question, when visiting our conservancy properties, it is all of the above. So if you were able to get all those answers correct, you can send us an email and we'll put your name to the drawing for one of these conservancy hats. And I'll be dropping my email in the chat so everyone can just shoot me an email. And yeah, so at this time, I'm going to be turning it back to our president, Heidi, for our question and answer session.
Thank you, Marilla. I see you enjoyed the multiple choice answers. Now I know the next time Marilla gives a trivia, I'm gonna look for the ones that are like the all of the above answers. Does anybody have any questions?
We have at least 6 or 7 messages in the chat congratulating Mark and Russ for joining the board and expressing delight that they are. And I want to add mine to that too.
Yeah, we're very excited. There's Marilla's email in the chat, so everybody can compete for the hat. It's a hot item. No questions? Anybody for Adair? Anybody else wants to ask about the Hermit of Balch Hill?
Well, this is your takeaway tonight.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. It was really wonderful to see your faces on the Zoom, and we are really excited for where the organization is going. I hope you got the annual report in your mailbox recently. And you can always ask. We have more in the office. We've got the promise to protect. Adair's got more history and more photos. So stop by, and we hope we see you on the trails.
And just a last minute.
Yes.
Sorry. I will be sharing the recording with everyone. It will be on our website, and I will also send it out to everyone that registered, so you can have a copy of it.
Thank you, Marilla.